Back for another segment of Q's Corner brought to you by Dunk Mama Media. We always have great guests. Today is no different. We have Coach Dele Sobomehin. How you doing today, Dele?
Good, man. Thanks for having me, man. I'm definitely excited.
No problem at all. I've heard nothing but positive things from you, from the Dunk Mama family. So I was looking forward to this interview. I like to start it with this question, man. When did you fall in love with sports? When did you fall in love with sports?
Sports in general, yeah, man. At a young age, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, so in the Great Northwest, up north, and I grew up in a household eventually with four boys. So I have three brothers who I grew up with. So you can imagine there was a lot of energy in the house. And at a young age, my father chose to get rid of all TVs in the house. My father is from Nigeria, so his emphasis was always, on the academic side. So anything that he perceived as a distraction or something that would impede, our academic progress or success, he eliminated. So got rid of our TV. So essentially, at like first or second grade, I grew up for majority of my life with no TV in the household. So that obviously it left us just make up games outside and compete, man. So, I had a blast of a childhood. I'm grateful to have the brothers that I did. And, all my bros were athletes. All were competitive. It was just nonstop activities at all times.
That's dope, bro. When did the passion go from just sports in general to basketball?
Well, I'm from the era where you usually played 3, 4 sports. It was a year-round thing. So you were involved in, not just hoop, but at a younger age, I was exposed to soccer because my father, he's West African. So I felt like it was in the blood. It was a way for me to connect with my dad to play that sport. So I started soccer first. That was his love, and he played in Nigeria. So
Right.
then, but I was still exposed to hoop, like second grade in the blacktop, first, second grade recess. And then, we lived close by to a great park, in Portland, Oregon. And Portland is kind of known for the amount of parks that we have. So there were plenty of opportunities to go to a local public park and just ball, and there was always some great runs, a few dudes who might be on one, dudes acting a fool, getting in fights and all that. So at a young age, I was exposed to it, and I was like the young kid who was on the side court, who couldn't play on the main court yet, right? And you're just waiting your time, man, to just one day when you're like in sixth, seventh grade, and they're short one, and like, hey, little man, you want to run? And then boom, and the rest is history from there. Now you're a young buck who has the opportunity to play against grown men essentially, and you're just being pushed, and you adjust, and you learn how to compete, and just enjoy the game. So that's where I started to fall in love with hoop. It was really middle school is when it took the shift, both like being able to compete at local parks. And then I would say also just getting exposed to the high level high school ball. Our public school league was the dominant league in the area. So it's called the PIL. And in the PIL, you had schools like Jefferson High School and Benson Tech, which is where I ended up going. And B Tech and Jeff and Grant, Terrell Brennan was a Grant head, a few other great ball players who went on to play D1 and pro from Grant. But I would say Jeff has produced most guys like Aaron Miles, just to name a few. Terrence Jones, was from Jefferson High School. So I grew up going to the rivalry games and just being inspired by the level of play and just the stage that they played on, man. It was like it was an electric experience, just the amount of energy in the gym. It was always a sold out crowd, man. And this is just a regular season game. So the culture of basketball in Portland, also due to the fact that Nike's up the street, the HQ. So all that is kind of interwoven into the culture of Portland or Oregon, so you combine a bunch of parks, you got Nike, and then you got a culture of hoop, man. So it was always a real turned up environment. And in middle school, I started to play organized squads for the first time. And then by the time I waited my turn to get to high school, obviously, I was fortunate enough to play on one of the most competitive programs in the city of Portland, which is Benson Polytechnic. So got to play with a lot of D1 guys. Junior year had probably 5, 6 D1 guys on the squad. Senior year probably had like 3, I believe. So So I got exposed to real high level hoop, not only on my squad, but also, in my league in the conference. So it was pretty lit.
Now that's great. And the question I have for that is, being from a place where that energy generates from a sport or a passion that everybody has love for, such as basketball in Portland. Did you ever feel extra pressure just being from that type of environment? Because people sometimes look at you like, oh, you got to make it, or you got to go to the league or whatever have you. Did you have those dreams or ambitions, or did you just see basketball as something, as a tool and something that you just love to do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I saw it as just something that was fun to do. It was just a sport. Honestly, I wasn't exposed to the whole, ambitious side of the game where a bunch of guys are striving to play college ball. It was at a time where AAU ball was not as commonplace. It wasn't as widespread. So we really only had like one or two AAU teams in the whole state of Oregon, right? One was ran by my JV coach, Troy Berry, who's a legendary dude out of Portland, Oregon, who was roommates and played with GP the Glove, who's from Oaktown. So he started a program. It was that one and perhaps one other program that was known where all the top players in Oregon would come and compete in what's known obviously as AAU on the circuit. So all the top guys. I never got exposed to that lifestyle, to be frank. I was a competitive high school player, but I never got in the lane where you got exposed to trainers and then you got exposed to like high level hoop. It was really just another sport, but it was my favorite sport. So I enjoyed it the most, and I was the most hype on it, I would say. But I never really had the pressure of, oh man, I got to make it, to D1. And that's also due to the fact that I come from a household, as I said, where both my parents really emphasized academics or over sports. So I never even saw athletics as the way,
Mm.
as like a route, to get to college or to get it paid for. I didn't really have a clue. So I really, I was on a path of becoming an engineer. And my father and my mom both supported that because I was always strong in math and science. So that was just a natural progression and path that they, supported. So I ended up going to Santa Clara University, which had one of the top, undergrad engineering schools at the time. So that's why I ended up there. Really, it was more academic based, and a lot of my scholarships were also academic as well.
I love that, man. Just from a lot of the positive things that I've heard and amazing things that you are doing up to date, I definitely want to talk about that and let you talk about that. Um,
Oh, cool.
when did it? When did you make that transition for yourself to where I go from being a player to now I'm going to coaching and training and starting your academy? But I'll let you talk about it. But how did that transition begin?
Yeah, nah, that's awesome. I mean, the story is pretty juicy, because I was just an undergrad um, in the engineering school at Santa Clara, and I was the engineering school. As you know, is one of the most rigorous academic, loads that you can have. It's one of the most demanding majors, to be in an engineering school. So that was tough. To be honest, it was a load that I wasn't used to, and it was it was a beast. So I went through all of undergrad, um, and while I continued to feel my love for the game and continue to compete, obviously at the rec or in IMs and all that, playing with the guys on the squad, in the off season and stuff, had a lot of relationships with dudes who were the scholarship athletes. So that was always, still a love that I pursued and I continue to build. But then my older bro was actually at Stanford University. He's 2 years older than me, and he kind of had a story, much like I would say a Rudy story, where he walked on the team. He managed the team for a few years, and then he ended up walking on his last year. Back in the golden years of Stanford hoop with Mike Montgomery, when Stanford was a top 10 program back with Jay Chill, and all those guys, right? So he walked on, and that kind of opened up a lot of opportunities in the area. The Stanford brand, as you know, carries a lot of weight out here, and there's a lot of trust with that brand. So if you were an athlete at Stanford, there were a lot of opportunities to train kids in the area. A lot of the boosters, and folks who were Stanford alumni always wanted their kids to be exposed to a Stanford athlete because that is like the pinnacle, if you will, of scholar athletes, right? So There's no parent, obviously, who wouldn't want their kid to be influenced by that caliber of individual. So he pretty much started getting opportunities, and he laid the groundwork. He brought me on board because the demand was starting to grow, and he was not able to train as many kids as probably he had opportunity to. So he brought me on. I started to train, and then that's when I learned like that it was like a calling, if you will, because the way I was able to connect with kids, the energy that I brought, it was clear that based on their response and based on the increased demand, that that was a gift that I had. So I started to get opportunities to coach their school teams, and then that led to other opportunities. And then we started a camp, and they did with a teammate at Stanford. I came on board with that. So coaching just became like a thing that I was doing more on the side, but it was such a passion, and it was clear that that was a gift. So because every kid who I interacted with, every opportunity I got to coach was, I saw the impact, I saw the response, I saw the connection that made, and it felt empowering, and it was like, it was a blessing for sure.
What have you seen through the differences of high school players, college players, as well as professional players, as far as the levels of training and coaching?
uh, First by their athletic ability, and I would say physical attributes, right? So when I say that, speaking to a good friend who's an assistant coach at Stanford, just as one example, he shared with me that I think about 80 to 90% of the team has extraordinary wingspan. That's 80 to 90. I think over 10 players on that team have a extraordinary, meaning if you're 6'4", you have a 6'9" wingspan or something, right? So it's a longer wingspan than your height. That's just a physical attribute that just it defines one D1 team. Now, obviously that's a Power Five, but still, I think the D1 athletes starting there, when you go from high school to that's where you see just certain length and stuff that you just are not used to, at the high school level, right? And then when you go beyond to pro NBA, obviously being the pinnacle, that's where you see really the most freakish athletes, if you will, that are out there, like a Giannis, like a 7 foot wingspan on a 6'5" dude, that type of stuff, right? So I think that's like first, and I think that's important to know because a lot of guys don't really understand like really how special some of these athletes are, at the high levels, and then not just that, obviously your ability to jump, speed, strength, all those things are factors that weigh into your ability to compete at the highest. And then after that, I would say the, the higher up you go, the more the game becomes about skill and IQ. So what you learn in the whole AAU youth basketball world, I've coached against so many superior athletes from all over the Bay, from the East Bay, SF, San Ho. And the thing is, over time, at a young age, I might be getting smacked by, a certain age group or certain squads in the Bay. But the long-term vision that I have is I know when kids are trained in the right way and are able to develop their game and just understand the game from a different level, they're able to compete the older they get. At a younger age, if you just got a big kid who's faster than everybody, he's going to dominate, right? And I've seen kids in school ball just eat everywhere, but no skill, or just not really, doesn't really understand the game, but he can have his way. So what happens is as our kids progress through high school, now our kids, I would say, and I'm proud of the fact that the Team Esface athletes usually emerge, I would say on average, to be stronger high school players when it's all said and done because they understand the game and they're more skilled. And and when you go to high school games right now over the past few years, I can go to a public school game and see 6'4", 6'5" dudes on the bench not playing. And why is that, you wonder? The same kids who were dominating in grade school, thought that they were the man. When they get to high school, a coach can't really work with them as well because they don't understand the game. They still haven't been taught helps ID. They haven't really built habits that are going to translate to higher play, when you get to varsity. And then obviously the college ball, it's a notch higher as far as just the nuances of the game and really understanding the game from a tactical standpoint. Like, how do you read a pick and roll, what's the coverage. All those things are not really emphasized at a young age. I would say high school even, but when you go up, it's that. So I would say those are two things. The nuances of the game, they matter more, and they're focused on more to create more separation, right, to compete. And then the last thing I would say is specialization. I think the higher up you go, it's like a pyramid with the NBA being the top, right? The higher up you go, the more specialized it becomes. To play pro, it's more about a team is trying to fill pieces. So you get hired for a job. Like a 3-and-D guy is a commonly used phrase now, or idea, where teams in the NBA and in high level and overseas will just hire guys who can hit a three and play D, right? So that's all you're getting hired for. It's not to say that those same guys couldn't step into any open gym and dominate and eat everybody up, right? Let's be frank, as far, and I'm talking about in a competitive run, but they're hired to do a specific job. And I think in the NBA, we see it as well, where if you're on a team with Steph Curry, right? If you have Steph on the team, Clay, and then obviously at one point KD, there's no real room in the game in that structure of a team for another scorer, because they have scores. So if you're on that team, you're a role player. But yet all these guys who are hired as role players may have other abilities, but just not at an extraordinary level, or as high of a level as Steph Curry or Clay. So I say that to say it's just more specialized when you get up, right? And it's not to say that you can't, expand your game in the offseason or come back with new abilities, but I think you get more hired for specific roles if you're not going to be that superstar out the gate, right?
No, I think you broke that down perfect. I agree with you. I think it's more specialized the older you get, more
Mm-hmm.
everything is detailed a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because speaking of detail, when it comes to student athletes as well as parents trying to guide their son or daughter and them picking a college, with you having the success you've had, I'm pretty sure you've seen a lot of kids go to different schools. What advice would you give to
Absolutely.
student athletes who may see this in choosing a school? Because that's a hard thing to do. When I was coming up, it was almost a thing where if you had certain schools just recruiting you, you were honored just to go to that school because of the name and the reputation they had. But that
Yeah,
doesn't mean
exactly.
that school is always best for you. So what advice would you give to the student athletes, in choosing a school?
First, from a basketball standpoint, it's where can you actually play and the best fit. And by that, I mean, A, if you love the game, at the end of the day, you want to play the game you love, right? You want to play. We all know when starting at a young age, everyone wants to play, right? The biggest, most classic complaint of any athlete on any squad across America and the world is, I'm not getting no burn. There's always some kids who think that they're not getting as much PT as they need or deserve, right? So PT playing is what we all want. And I think that's not wrong, right? We all want to play. So I think to be to assess a school where you can probably play is a big deal. And then I think the best fit is more like the style of play, the philosophy, what type of offense is a team running, what are their values, right? From a program standpoint, and you can research and observe a lot of this just by studying their teams, and watching games, and then doing a little more research, obviously trying to reach out to coaches and perhaps play, players on the team and otherwise. So I think, yeah, from a basketball standpoint, I would say those two things, you know, where can you play and in the best fit. And then from a culture, I would say from the non-hoop aspect, I would say the culture of the school, is what you should consider as well. And that relates to specifically academic majors that are available. If you already have an idea, kind of like you were saying earlier, uh, you know, it's not common, but if you do have an idea of some interest you have, or perhaps a career path be, beyond school, right? Or even when your playing career is over, right? Assuming that you want to pursue pro overseas or NBA, whatever it may be, then you should still find a school that can kind of set you up, in the best way. And then location, obviously, where a school is from a geographical standpoint has a different culture and vibe, right? Like a SoCal school on the beach is going to be a different vibe than a school in the deep South. You know what I mean? You know, or the Midwest for that matter. You know, or the East Coast vibe. It's a different vibe, right? All in all. So just understand the culture, what might be a good fit for you, or what you may be interested in getting exposed to, right? Which I think is also important. So yeah, I think those are a few of the factors. You know, I'm sure I didn't address all of them, but those are a few that came to mind, you know, immediately.
No, I think those are great ones. And especially like you said, because so many of us get caught up in just choosing a school for the sport we love or the sport which we play. But then you also got to think of the time you're not in a gym, the time that you're not in season. And
Yeah.
for a lot of student athletes, sometimes you wind up moving there. People wind up moving to the college town they went to, or they wind up having
Mm.
families there sometimes. So it's definitely about being more comfortable, not just always on the court. That's of course important, but like you said, just the culture and the environment for that person, that individual. With everything that you've gone through with basketball, from playing to coaching to training, having the success that you have with the academy you've had, what have you been most thankful for or appreciative of that you've been able to apply, not just to your basketball life, but just to your life in general today?
Yeah, no, good question. First thing, these are some huge values, if you will, and traits that I hold on to. And, you know, these are things that I've learned through the game of basketball that I've applied in my life, you know, and vice versa, I'd say. You know, I would say my life has always been intertwined with hoop. I've always been able to apply things I learned on the court and vice versa. But the big things are falling in love with the process, right? The process is what it's about. You know, it's not about a destination, but the process and enjoying it, man. I think too often we get concerned with these end results, and if we don't reach certain end results, then now we're unhappy, you know, or we don't feel a sense of satisfaction. I think that doesn't allow you to enjoy the day to day, you know, the grind, if you will, when you are embarking on that journey. That's what it's about. So, you know, enjoy the process, because greatness is is a long, is a long game, you know. So I would say that humility, there's always more to learn, man. There's always more to learn. So stay humble and open to learn, man. There's so much. I've been able to jump on so many virtual clinics with a wide array of coaches from JUCO high school all the way to D1 top tier schools. And man, and everyone has a unique thing to offer the game, a different mindset, a different little gem that you pick up. So you can always learn. And just when you think that you learned it all, the game evolves. So now it's a whole new game. So now you got to learn the new game that exists, which is not the game that you and I perhaps play. That, let's be honest, it's a whole different game. So I think just staying humble and then staying hungry. That's like the Team Esface mantra: staying hungry, which is to never be complacent, and to understand that the pr- process of becoming great is a relentless pursuit. So the relentless pursuit of greatness is what we're all embarking on, and that means it's never like, oh, we made it, So I think the one in the game who obviously exemplifies this the most is Kobe, who was oftentimes the best player undebatably in the league, but he was still in right after that game, right after that season, he was the one, critical of himself. He's watching, the game tape, trying to see how he could have improved, or how he could have just, you know, taken an inch off of this, or approach it from a different angle, or how can I grow and take my game to higher heights, although he was already arguably, at the top, of the whole game in the world. So I think that's it. And then lastly, just have fun with it. I think that has to do with falling in love with the process. But at the end of the day, if you're not having fun, for me, if it's not a positive vibe and energy, it's not really worth it, man, because it sucks the whole energy, out of the gym, out of life. So, I think in hoop, you see the squads that have the most fun, have the most positive energy. those teams are the ones who win. You know, the studies that show Steve Nash, you know, study where he gave the most high fives. You know, if you look up that article, it's online, where you see he gave the most high fives and how that correlates to wins. You know, so I think that's really, it's fun, it's positive when you get to engage with teammates and just have fun and show love, even if you're on the bench, man. Just have fun with it and enjoy it. So those are the biggest things that I would say I've learned and apply to life every day.
I think those are strong points, man. And it's it's amazing. I'll use the word amazing because everybody that I've been able to interview thus far has said something about humility or character,
Mm.
and really just character, you know. And I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah, exactly.
because everybody, it's easy to get caught up in just the sport, but it's
Yeah,
really about the person like yourself. You went from playing something you loved as far as basketball, and it took you all around the world. But I truly believe you being the great person that you are, and you know, the person that you are trying to help others become has helped you walk through other doors as well too. So I commend you on that too, Dele, man. I commend you on that.
appreciate it.
Um,
No, thank
la-
you, man.
Last question I want to ask you, and I'll let you go. For anybody who might see this, student athletes, parents, coaches, whomever, what advice would you leave with them?
Yeah, no, no, thank you, man. I really wanted to think about this one, you know, honestly, because it's important. So I'll talk about the parents first, if you don't mind, and then I'll talk about the athletes. So for parents, I'll say focus on development. I say that because it's a long game and try to see the big picture. So don't be caught up in the status of a certain team, much like you talked about. You know, guys can want to go to a team that has the most prestige or this and that, you know, although it may not be the right fit. The same thing for youth basketball. Just look for the right fit, you know, and try to see the long game. And I think that starts with it starts with what are the goals that you have, right? And what is the values that you hold, you know, most dear to your heart. So I say that because if you start with the end game, then you'll always be able to make the right decisions to achieve that goal. And when you're a parent, I think it's all about what are not only what club or what team is going to produce the best opportunities for growth and development, but also where is he going to be able to build, he or she be able to build their character, right? As we spoke on, because the character, I see that as more important than any crossover. You know, any skill that you learn, at the end of the day, your career will end, you know, if you're lucky in your 30s or something, or if you're 40 like a Vince Carter or something, which is, you know, an anomaly. But let's be honest, your career is going to end when you're still young. So character, relationships, you know, how you relate to other individuals is more important. So make sure that you look at who's coaching my son and understand what their values are, what their character is, because a coach has huge influence on your kid's life. Believe it or not, oftentimes a coach at a certain point in the child's development is going to have more influence than even the parent, you know, and you and I know that. So it's important and it behooves you to look at who is we're working with your kid with a critical eye and ask them questions. Seek to understand what is important. What are their goals? Are they just focused on winning games, or are they really trying to help your kid develop? Is there a vision for your kid? Those are the things that I would ask if I was a parent, to make sure that you find the right place for your kid. And then for athletes, you know, I think we kind of spoke on this, but it's similar to what I was saying earlier, specifically with the parents. Is for athletes is identify your goals and always start with the end game. You know, so and know and challenge yourself to identify what matters most to you, right? And if you write those down, it's not to say that they have to stay like that, right? Don't be afraid that if you identify a goal or what's important, it has to stick with you for the rest of your life. There's nothing wrong with that changing throughout your journey. But at least at this stage in your life, make sure you ID what your goals are, and then make sure that you make decisions, obviously, that lead you closer to achieving and attaining that goal, and not obviously the opposite. So I would say that that's that's probably one of the biggest ones, and so it's kind of the same thing. Consider the long game, and not just be short term focus, and study the game too, man. Players are out there, obviously, with YouTube. There's a lot that you can learn with the internet, and the information age. So just study players. Look at a D1 athlete if that's your aspiration, and see what they did in high school and in elementary and middle school, and just try your best to, just stay humble. Obviously, like we talked about, stay hungry, and stay positive, man. I think that you'll enjoy it, and you'll never go wrong, if you have that approach.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dele Sobomehin, thank you for the time today, bro.
Hey, likewise, man. Thank you for the opportunity. And I love what you guys are doing. I think it's powerful for the game, and just for the community of ball players and parents all over the world, man. So thank you. Keep doing what you're doing, please. I watched a few of your other interviews. I loved them. So and again, thanks for the opportunity, man. Have a great one.